Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider podcast. Today is Thursday, October the 10th. I'm Zach Ewing. Along with me today are Reed Darcey, LSU beat writer for The Advocate, and our extraordinary Baton Rouge columnist, Scott Rabalais. We're already in here having fun today.
We are.
We've already banged signs around. We've already had had to take two on this podcast.
We've already talked about the Saints. We've already
we've already
them out the way.
Espoused Spencer Rattler opinions and all of that. So now it is time to get down to LSU versus Ole Miss. It is. I think it's easy. It's LSU's biggest game of the season, right? I mean, you could argue Alabama, but they pretty much have to win this one to make that a big game. USC was a big game, Rab, but that was, season opener. Nobody really knew what they had. I think this is the game.
Oh yeah, I mean this is a game that determines whether you stay in the playoff hunt or not. You stay in the SEC championship game hunt. And I mean, you could say, technically, you could run the table. We were just talking about the 1987 Saints running the table to get in their first playoffs. But really, if you don't win this one, your chances of running the table are not great. So yeah, it's huge, and it's huge for Ole Miss as well. I mean, they have that unexpected loss to Kentucky. They've got Georgia left on the schedule. They've got this game. They're not in the position to want to afford too many losses either. So yeah, it's huge for both teams. And as always talk about with the expanded playoff, does the regular season, is it diluted or not? Well, you could say this is kind of a playoff game.
And I think LSU's loss to USC made this an even bigger game than it would have been, right? Your margin of error shrinks. It makes every big game from here on out that much more important. So I think LSU needs to win to keep its playoff hopes alive. Like that's there's no way around it. I mean that's what the deal is here.
Yeah, we'll talk about the stakes here in a minute and go through our breakdown of offense versus defense on each side. And finally end with predictions. I do want to let you know, first of all, that our show is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back with our breakdown of LSU versus Ole Miss right after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love, gave me love.
Okay, guys, so LSU, Ole Miss, it's at Tiger Stadium, 6:30 p.m. Saturday night on ABC. It's also the game, in addition to everything else, LSU has chosen to make this the game where they're sort of celebrating Tiger Stadium's 100th anniversary all year long, but this is the game that they're focusing on.
Yeah, it's the 100th anniversary season of LSU, and the actual 100th anniversary is like in November when they played the first game back in 1924. But this is why Ole Miss, because this is the rivalry that really is the most intense.
Because go to hell, Ole Miss. That's why.
And go to hell, LSU. Yeah, there's been both of those things over the years. There's just there's the geographic proximity. There's the history. There's the great games, the great players. Really, it's had its ups and downs, this rivalry over the years, and LSU has usually dominated. And for a long time, the games were played here and not in Mississippi for some reason, back from the 30s to the 60s. But it's a great rivalry that maybe has more great memories for LSU fans than for Ole Miss fans, but nonetheless, it's an intense one, and I think it's a perfect choice for it to be this. And then they're going to do some kind of LED thing, right? Reed, they're going to have some kind of light show.
Fans are going to get little bracelets that light up, so that they wear the bracelets, and then LSU can light them up, and you'll see like the whole crowd covered in lights. It's going to be pretty cool, and it will be like a totally unique environment because you got those wristband lights combined with the new lights in Tiger Stadium, we still haven't really seen them at a full-on night game yet. So that should be cool as well.
It's gonna be like a rave. Yeah, we'll talk about this later. Ole Miss has not won in Baton Rouge since 2008. So it's been a long time now. They did win last year's game 55-49. And if you kind of look back at LSU's season last year, that game really ends up costing LSU a lot. They also lost at Alabama, but okay, that's going to happen. You look back and you change that Ole Miss game, everything changes for LSU last year. And so that's the similar thing as we look at the stakes for this one. You guys mentioned it before the break. For both teams, really. Ole Miss has the Georgia game left, as you mentioned. If they win this one and only lose to Georgia, they're 10-2. I think they're probably still in the playoff hunt. But you can't lose this one and lose to Georgia and expect to be in the playoff hunt. And likewise for LSU, if you lose this one, that's already 2 losses. You still have the trip to A&M in a couple weeks. Let's not forget Arkansas, who took off a big scalp in Tennessee last week. And then you still have Alabama, of course. To me, as you said, Rab, it's almost an elimination game. Almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's, now the way teams are knocking each other off, in unexpected ways, like last week, we saw 5 of the top 11 go down in the AP poll. You could say, I'm starting to think maybe a 9-3 team's got a shot, but you can't count on that. Right, you really can't count on that. You want to go through, shoot for. I think everybody's been saying 10-2 is the over/under, and that's if you're in a Power 5 conference, a Power 4 conference rather, like LSU and Ole Miss, you want to. You'll feel pretty good about your chances with that, and then 3 or 4 or 5 SEC teams could make the field of 12. So, but beyond that, you don't have much chance. So it's an elimination game for both teams. So it's nice to see that in a way that the regular season, a game that's in the middle of the season, still has the kind of meaning that's going to impact these teams' fortunes at the very end.
And more than that, Reed, we've talked about this during the bye week and everything. I don't think we've seen LSU play at a level where we think that looks like a college football playoff team. Maybe the first half against South Alabama, but against a good level of competition, we just got to see it from LSU.
Yeah, we haven't seen it, and we're looking for that complete game, and we saw that complete game against South Alabama, and LSU passed that test. But again, it took us 5 weeks to really get to see that. So if you're an LSU fan, you got to sit here and decide, how much confidence do you have in LSU's defense? And when you look back at the Ole Miss game last year, that was really when all of LSU's defensive issues came to a head, right? And that was the game where it forced Brian Kelly to make changes, not only in the short term, but also the long term as well. It's really the catalyst that really led to him overhauling his defensive staff. And so I think now it's only fitting that Ole Miss comes to town for probably the biggest game of the year, and LSU gets a chance to sort of measure its progress, over the last year, measure the progress they've made against the same opponent, right? That returns a lot of its offensive production. So, we'll get into it. We'll break it down. But I think, LSU's defense, it's better than it was last year around this time. But how much better is it? And do you think it can slow down Ole Miss? That's the question we'll have to answer.
Yeah, how could it not be? How could it not be better? Yeah.
That's what I've been saying. You had to expect some improvement at some point this year, and Ole Miss, they have a formidable offense with some formidable weapons, and Lane Kiffin calling the plays. They haven't looked particularly great in their 2 SEC games, though. They only scored 17 points against Kentucky, and they scored 27 points last week against South Carolina. But just they're averaging 22 points a game in the SEC games. So I don't think they're the greatest team on third down.
No,
in the country. So that's going to be interesting. Again, LSU's not going to stop them. It's not going to be 55-49 with 1,300 yards combined of offense as last year's game. But as the LSU's going to give up some points. Can they get enough stops, maybe turnovers, sacks, whatever, to force Ole Miss into a punt or giving up the ball and to get the ball to the offense, which is going to have to score some points too to win.
All right, so before we begin our breakdown, I want to let you know today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. And today's injury report is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. Guys, LSU may have a little bit of a problem at receiver. We've been talking about Chris Hilton, it feels like, since middle of August, and whether he'll be back. Still questionable, Reed, but he's not the only one. C.J. Daniels also questionable. Kyle Parker is out. They're a little thin at wide receiver.
Yeah, so if those two guys, Chris Hilton and C.J. Daniels, don't play, we're not sure if they will or not, then LSU is kind of has a problem at receiver. I mean, you still got Kyron Lacey and Aaron Anderson, but behind them, it depends. We're not really sure who will step up. Will it be Sheldon Sampson? Will it be another guy? So yeah, if those two don't play, it could get a little dicey. But based on everything Brian Kelly has sort of said, it sort of seems like if C.J. Daniels does miss this game, it's not going to hold him out too long. And obviously Chris Hilton's situation, I'll believe it when I see it. When he gets back on the field, Brian Kelly said yesterday that it's been a really unusual, complicated injury. It's healed more slowly than they expected it to. It's put him out for way longer than they expected it to, and he's done everything he's possibly could to get back on the field. It just hasn't happened yet. It just hasn't healed enough. So obviously, if LSU can get him back this week, that would be huge. But I don't think, as an LSU fan, you can count on having him in the lineup. It's more like wait until you see it.
And what kind of an impact can he have if he comes back? Yeah. It's his first game. It's against Ole Miss. It's going to be difficult. There is some good news, I think, on that injury report. Zy Alexander was not on the injury report. He had a concussion a few weeks back. He's back. And then probably the big one, Caden Durham, who left the South Alabama game just before halftime, Rab, with like a foot injury. He is listed as probable and seems like he's ready to fire.
Yeah, so that can make up, his presence can make up maybe for the thin wide receiver core, and of course you have the tight ends as well. But yeah, those are both really big. Like LSU, this is an advantage that LSU has, that they had the week off and to heal up some of those injuries. Not all, but some. And Durham is a big one. He's been the most explosive player. He's shown a lot of speed. I'm thinking back to that pass he caught, kind of wheeling out of the backfield in the left flat from Garrett Nussmeier, and he just ran past everyone. Now it's going to be harder to run past the Ole Miss defense than the South Alabama defense, but he's got that ability. So those are big, and the receiver issues, that's a problem. Again, they can compensate with, in some ways, throwing out of the backfield, which they like to do, throwing to the tight ends. But Durham can change the game. Is one of those guys who can change the game in your favor very quickly, and that's. If he plays, and you would think he'll play, that's a very big one for LSU.
I think having both him and Zy Alexander is a big deal. LSU needs all its corners healthy, especially against this Alabama offense. Trey Harris, the star receiver, who we'll talk about later. Ole Miss offense. Trey Harris, he's questionable. We're not sure if he's going to play or not. With or without him, LSU needs its corners.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up. Ole Miss, by the way, has 18 players listed on its injury report. I think a little bit of that, 7 of those guys are probable. I'm looking at it right now. But there are 4 out, 3 more doubtful, and then 4 more questionable, including Trey Harris, who's the star, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But I don't, I even hesitate to bring this up, but Shane Beamer, the South Carolina coach last week, complained about Ole Miss and the timing of their injuries, how they always seemed, every time South Carolina would get a first down or a big play and would try to hurry to the line, Ole Miss would magically have a player hurt, and some of those guys returned to the game. Sometimes it was the same guy who was getting hurt over and over again. And you almost wonder, are they putting 18 players in the injury report to well, look, he was hurt coming in, and now you're the designated injury faker when we want to slow an offense down. I hesitate to bring that up, but I do think it's a real thing that happens sometimes. And Lane Kiffin has been accused of it enough times to where you have to consider that possibility.
And some are more egregious than others. Some are, you can tell it's obvious that
guys walking toward the sideline and then they just fall down.
Or they're getting ready for the play, and the play's taking too long to get in, and the play clock's winding down, and the guy cramps up. Some are more obvious than others. I don't know if there's an easy solution to it. I know LSU fans are going to be upset. If they think that an Ole Miss player is faking injury, I really don't like it when teams do it, because it almost becomes a boy who cried wolf situation, right? Because what if a guy's actually hurt and then our LSU fans gonna boo him?
And you get mad at LSU fans for booing an injured player, but at the same time, what are they supposed to think if you faked 5 injuries before that? So I don't.
Oh, there'll be boos.
It is definitely a cry wolf situation.
I think the over-under on will there be boos or not is, I'll take the over. Yeah, I mean, this is something, you have people like Shane Beamer calling them out. And all these players on the injury report, you could say, they're trying to say, well, look, trying to justify it. Or it could also be Lane Kiffin, showing his what and saying, hey, I don't like the injury report. I like the availability report. So here's a bunch of players. If anybody's got an ingrown toenail, I'm going to put them on the list. So it's definitely gamesmanship all around with Ole Miss, and like people are getting tired of it. I mean, you got announcers like Kirk Herbstreit and Sean McDonough calling these things out while they're calling the game, but it's also very difficult to adjudicate.
How do you know if a guy really has a cramp or not?
It's like,
there's no way to tell that in real time.
I had a friend in high school who was talking about, you get out of something and said, you can just say, I've got a ringing in my ears. It comes and it goes. How can they prove anything? And that's kind of true in this case. It's like, oh, well, he got better. It's a college athlete. He improved. Like the ankle was bad, but now it's okay. So, but it's a problem. It's a growing problem in college football. It's not just Ole Miss. And I won't say that LSU's never had a player that faked an injury either, but it's a growing problem. And I think the LSU fans who will be, I think, a little keyed up to begin with this game are going to be watching very intently. Anytime an Ole Miss player goes down, they're going to be booing. I'm sure some will be justified, some won't.
For me, it was always if I didn't have time to get the thermometer on the light bulb as a kid, just have a terrible headache. Prove me wrong. How do you know whether I have a headache or not?
You and
gotta
Keith,
stay home from school.
You and Keith Griffith would have been good chums.
All right. Our breakdown besides that, and I do think it's an issue, but like you said, Reed, I don't know what you do about it. I don't know. It's difficult for the refs to see sometimes, and even if they could tell that it was probably a faked injury, how do you know for sure? I just don't know. So anyway, we'll begin our breakdown with that caveat, and we start when LSU has the ball. And we've talked so much about the Ole Miss offense. I think you mentioned they've only allowed 22 points, or only scored an average of 22 points in SEC play. They've allowed less than 10 points per game in SEC play. This defense, it's number 2 in the nation in yards per carry against. Their rush defense, I think, is number 3 in the nation in rushing yards per game against. Some of that is game state. They've had such huge leads. Teams aren't going to run against them a lot, but. We've talked so much this season about LSU trying to use the run to set up the pass. Ole Miss has stopped the run.
Yes, and the caveat there is that Ole Miss hasn't really played a top-flight offense. Really, the first 2 SEC opponents, Kentucky and South Carolina, they're in the bottom half of the conference in terms of offense. They're not really going to scare you in terms of passing offense. They can kind of run the ball, especially South Carolina, but those are 2 offenses that you can stop, right? But that being said, Ole Miss defense is a lot better than it was last year around this time. They loaded up in the portal. I think when you look at the 2 differences between the defenses, LSU made changes to its coaching staff, and Ole Miss made changes to its personnel. Right, so they really hit the portal hard. They got edge rushers, they got corners, they got Trey Amos, who's a Louisiana kid. He's a good cover corner, and so their personnel is a lot stronger than it was last year at this time, and that's helped them play better defense. But again, like, they haven't been tested against a true top half of the conference SEC offense like LSU. So you look at those numbers, and it looks kind of daunting for LSU. But I think again, Ole Miss's defense is almost just as unproven as LSU's defense is, I think, at this point.
One thing that Kentucky did really, really well was control the ball against this Ole Miss defense. And even if they didn't score a ton of points, I think they had almost 40 minutes time of possession. And sometimes, the best defense is a good offense, et cetera, et cetera. Rab, do you think that's going to be part of LSU's game plan Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, you have to strike a balance. I mean, you want to be explosive, you want to hit the big plays and stuff like that, take the top off of defense, but you also want to keep away from Jackson Dart and Trey Harris if he plays, and this Ole Miss offense for sure. And so, can LSU do that? I think it's one of the fascinating things about about this game. Can they, not just with the run, but with the short passing game, which they like to employ. Brian Kelly said a couple of weeks ago they had called 36 runs in a game, and they ended up running the ball 21 times. So that's a lot of checking out of runs to passes. But okay, that's what he said. So yeah, it's going to be important for LSU to, and they've shown that. They've shown that ability with Nussmeier to be maybe quite a little less explosive than they were under Jaden Daniels. With him at quarterback and with Neighbors and Thomas and those things, but those players, but also maybe really good at what is called for in this game, which is a methodical drive. And even if it only winds up in 3 points, if you keep the ball for 6.5 minutes, the 6.5 less minutes that Ole Miss has it, so that's a plus in a way. Maybe it adds up.
It's cumulative because by the end of the game, your defense is fresher.
Yes,
and their defense gets worn down. And so that's what Kentucky did. That's what you want to do. Today's Star Player segment is proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. And always pick a star player from the opposing team. We went with Trey Harris today, 885 yards already, or 855 yards, I think it is, and 5 touchdowns in 6 games. So do the math. That's over 140 yards a game. Just really terrific player. As we mentioned, questionable with an ankle injury. And we'll get into this, guys, and I'm going to kind of segue this into our segment for when Ole Miss has the ball.
Right.
Because Trey Harris is a terrific weapon, and you obviously do not want to get him loose. I personally believe defending this team starts up front. You've got to get pressure. You've got to disrupt them in timing before they can get the ball out to Trey Harris, because if they do that, it's already too late.
Yeah, and Trey Harris is a huge part of their offense. He's a really good receiver. He's big, he's physical, he's strong. He can win contested catches. He can win in tight coverage. But he's not just a guy with physical advantages. He can also separate. He's a good route runner. He's really polished. He's really advanced in that sense of his game. And I was watching parts of the Kentucky game, and I saw him, and I'm like, man, this guy can run some routes. So I think he can pose problems for an LSU defense that wants to play man coverage. I'd expect LSU to put Zy Alexander or Ashton Stamps on him. One of those two, and I think I'm not really sure if LSU is going to double team him, bracket him, or just leave him one-on-one. I think if LSU leaves him one-on-one, Ole Miss can really take advantage of that, and it can become a problem for the LSU defense. So maybe we see more double teams, more bracket coverage, but of course that leaves you more vulnerable in different parts of your defense. So LSU will, if Trey Harris plays, LSU will have to balance the need to keep him covered with the need to pressure the quarterback and really play defense on the rest of Ole Miss's weapons, so they have a lot of weapons. But he should be the main focus of the game plan, I think.
Yeah, we can't. I mean, Trey Harris is a very good player, and I think it would obviously help LSU if he wasn't out there, Rab. But Jackson Dart, an experienced quarterback, a transfer from USC last year, had a real good game, or a real good season for the Rebels. 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Just against LSU, or you mean?
No, this is overall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is. I mean, it really 60. Let's see.
It seemed like that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's 73.4% completion, already 2,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, rating of 197.9. I mean, like, he's the real deal. And yes, some of that is against teams that were just completely overmatched, and they're just racking up huge numbers. But they also did that against LSU last year, so you have to be wary of what he can do. Yeah,
no, he's one of the top group of quarterbacks in the SEC. However you want to define that, he's one of those players that you marked before the year said that guy is a problem. That guy can pick apart a defense if you give him time. Obviously, this has been, to me, and Reed can agree or disagree, I think one of the best improvements this defense has made over last year is getting pressure with just 4. Blake Baker likes to blitz, but they don't always have to blitz. And the more often here, if you can cover all these guys, without bringing extra pressure, I think it would be best. So that's but it's a tall task. He's one of the better quarterbacks you're going to play all season. Probably the best quarterback they've played so far. Moss, the quarterback for USC, was very good, but I don't think he's very good that day. But he's probably not quite at Jackson Dart's level. He's right up there with Milroe and anyone else that they're going to throw at you. So.
Diego Pavia might be number 2 on that list, man.
Yeah.
Diego Pavia.
He looked really good last
He
year.
certainly did. He's climbing. He's climbing. But this is you could say arguably the biggest challenge for LSU. But Trey Harris, let me just say, he's from Lafayette. He's played at Louisiana Tech. In fact, he was high school teammates with Malik Neighbors. He's highly motivated to play in this game. I would be shocked. And obviously, LSU coaches are preparing for him to play. I would be shocked if he doesn't try to play in this game. This means a great deal to him to come back to the home state and show out.
And you mentioned Jackson Dart. We should point out, great name for a quarterback. Jackson
Isn't it?
Dart.
Right. Yeah.
Kid was born to play quarterback.
You can't have a Jackson Shank playing quarterback.
No,
you got to have a Dart.
And I think, like you said, Rab, LSU has to create pressure. I mean, that's a key for them every week, but it's especially true this week. When Jackson Dart has a clean pocket, he can just carve up a defense, and he can also run. He's super mobile as well, super athletic. I think there were plays last year where he hurdled LSU defenders. So he absolutely. You need to pressure him and you need to keep him contained in the pocket. Pro Football Focus has him, I believe, completing close to 80% of his passes, maybe around 78% of his passes when he has a clean pocket. But when he's under pressure, that number dips below 50%. So LSU needs to collapse the pocket. It needs to disrupt him. It's shown an ability to do so, but again, Ole Miss is kind of a different challenge, and he poses a different threat than the quarterbacks they've played so far.
So do you come all out at him? I'm thinking of a play in the game I watched the other night where they just brought like 8 guys, and it was like maybe it was the Saints and Chiefs, but I forget what game it was. But do you bring a lot of extra pressure, or are you just trying to get in with that front 4 and send a bunch of people back into cover?
I think you have to. I think you have to blitz. You can't just leave him with a clean pocket, because I think
I tend to agree.
You have to disrupt his timing.
Yeah. I think if he just has time to throw, then he's going to complete his passes, and it's going to be an efficient offense. I think if you crowd the line of scrimmage and bring extra defenders into the box, you can stop the run game as well, which is another key, and you can get some pressure on Dart. So I think the identity of the LSU defense is to create pressure, is to blitz a lot. That's why you brought Blake Baker in. So you have to let him, let him be the defense that he wants it to be, and live with the results.
Yeah, you mentioned the running game. Ole Miss also has 20 rushing touchdowns this year. Dart has 3 of them himself. Henry Parrish has 9. He's their leading rusher. They've scored 34 touchdowns in 6 games.
Yep.
And again, sometimes they're rolling up huge scores on overmatched competition. But this is an offense that if you let it get going, it can be very explosive. So that'll lead us to our Keys to the Game. Keys to the Game segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Keys to the Game, guys, if you had to boil it down after all we've talked about, we also have some trends on here. As I mentioned, LSU hasn't lost at Tiger Stadium to Ole Miss since 2008. They have not lost as a home underdog, which they're a 3.5-point underdog. We'll get to that after the break, but they haven't lost as a home underdog, I want to say, since 2020. So it's
12-0 in home night games under Brian Kelly.
Yeah. So how do they keep all this going? What's your key to the game, Reed?
Well, we've already talked about the need to create pressure. We've already talked about the need to sort of bracket coverage or defend Trey Harris. And we've already talked about the need to keep Jackson Dart in the pocket. But I think I'm glad you mentioned the run game, because it sort of segues into this well. I think if you defend the run, then you sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The stat we've kind of written about this week is that Ole Miss, the last 5 times, I believe, they haven't rushed for 100 yards. They're 1-4 in those games. So if you can hold Ole Miss under 100 rushing yards, then that bodes well for your chances. Their offense, as prolific as it is in the pass game, is really built on the run. They use the run to set up themselves in favorable down and distance situations, and really use that as the foundation of their offense. So if you can create negative plays, if you can stop a nice chunk of Ole Miss plays behind the line of scrimmage, then that disrupts their run game. And I think Rab mentioned earlier about third down. They haven't been good on third down either. They're 4 of their last 23 third downs. They've converted only 4 of the last 23. So if you stop runs behind the line of scrimmage, then you not only do you stop the run, you also create disfavorable third down situations, second and longs, third and longs. And so that's kind of, I think, the big key that I'm focusing on. How disruptive can LSU's front be? Can they force negative plays? And I think if they do, then that bodes well for their chances.
Rab, got a key to the game?
Got
a different key to the game?
A different key to the game. No, that's a really good one. And the people focus on passing offenses, but it's often as is the case here, the run game that is the bedrock of it. Let's talk about LSU's offense. Like I said, just time of possession, people say is not an important stat, but I think it could be in this game if LSU can keep the ball away from Ole Miss's offense, as we said earlier. Can be more of a ball possession, extending the drives kind of team. Maybe gamble on fourth down, which Brian Kelly has shown he's not averse to doing. That's going to be big. And sure, you want to hit a big play. You want to hit a big play to Kyron Lacey or to Mason Taylor or have Caden Durham run wild like he's shown a propensity to do. But just grinding it out against Ole Miss and running that clock and moving those chains is going to be big. So I think that's the thing. LSU having the ball more than Ole Miss does is a key, because if Ole Miss ends up with the ball for 36 minutes and they've got 200 yards rushing, obviously we know who's going to win the game.
Yeah, when I think of Ole Miss offense and Lane Kiffin offenses, you think of explosives. They're going to hit a couple. Yes. They always do.
Sure.
My thing is keep it to like 5 or fewer 20-plus yard plays. If you can do that, I think you win the game, because they are going to hit some, but you just can't let it be every drive. You can't let it be a couple times a quarter where they're getting field flipping plays or long touchdowns, and that's also going to lead to what you guys are talking about, is controlling the clock, getting off the field on third down. I mean, all these things are clearly important. So there are keys to the game.
And say the LSU defense does struggle again, the offense by controlling the clock and going on long drives, you can prevent Ole Miss from getting scoring chances, right? You can limit those. So by controlling the clock, the offense can almost play defense for the defense,
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. Tiger fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. We're going to take our last break. We're going to be back in 60 seconds. We got predictions coming up. We're going to go around the SEC and pick who wins, Ole Miss or LSU.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit ClassicIndustrial.com for more information.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider podcast for Thursday, October 10th. Zach Ewing with Reed Darcey and Scott Rabalais. We're going to do our sports betting segment. We told you on Monday's show, Thomas Casale was kind of explaining where the betting line was going in this game. It has moved up a little bit. It is now Ole Miss minus 3.5. He didn't necessarily have an opinion on it then, but he does now. And he's also going to pick the other big game of the week in Ohio State, Oregon. So the Queen of Baton Rouge proudly sponsors the LSU Sports Insiders sports betting segment with Thomas Casale. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. Take it away, Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Last time we talked about LSU Ole Miss, Like LSU getting +3 or more at home. I think the Tigers keep that game close and potentially win outright. Another huge game on Saturday is Oregon, Ohio State. Line is Ohio State -3 with a total of 53.5 at DraftKings Sportsbook. Listen, this is going to decide who has the inside position in the Big Ten. These are the two top teams. Interesting pros versus Joes working here. A lot of the casual bettors hitting the over in this game, but the pro bettors are coming in on the under 53.5. I kind of like that myself. Both quarterbacks are new to the team this year. This is their first really huge game. I think Ohio State's going to play it more conservative, lean on their defense. So if you're looking to play, I know unders aren't exciting. You're rooting for nothing. But if you're looking to play in the Ohio State-Oregon, I lean under 53.5.
And Tiger fans, you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. And Rab, you said you had usually I'm the one with the sports betting tidbits. You said you've got one today.
I stole this from ESPN, which does a great job with research. They said, according to them, this is the first time that Ole Miss is a road favorite against a top 15 team going back to the 19, and why they picked this demarcation, I don't know, since the split between the FBS and FCS in 1978.
Wow.
So this is rare air for Ole Miss to be a road favorite over a top 15 team like LSU.
And we may have more. Check out bet.NOLA.com. We've got a bunch of sports betting coverage. I did not do the research on this. I can't imagine Ole Miss has been a favorite in Tiger Stadium very often at all. Even in some of LSU's down years, Ole Miss also wasn't very good. So that doesn't seem like it's happened very often. Last time LSU was a home underdog was 2 years ago against Alabama. Of course, they won that game in overtime. And then they were an underdog against Ole Miss 2 weeks before that and also won that game. So it kind of has similar echoes to that season a little bit, and that LSU had a questionable start, and they turned their season around with these 2 home wins. So that's what they're hoping to do. Well, also, of course, kicking off at the same time, just like during the South Alabama game, it was during the Georgia-Alabama game. This one's during the Oregon-Ohio State game. So we're going to go around the SEC, but if you guys have thoughts on Oregon-Ohio State, I won't stop you from that either. Today's Around the SEC segment is brought to you by Classic Industrial Services. Because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. And as we know in the SEC, it just means more, but it just means more losses right now. There's only one undefeated team left in the conference. That's Texas. Texas has the Red River rivalry, as they say. I still prefer shootout, but okay. Against Oklahoma at the Texas State Fairgrounds. We've got another traditional rivalry in Florida, Tennessee. South Carolina against Alabama as the Tide tries to kind of rebound. Where else is your attention being paid on Saturday?
I'll be watching Texas and Oklahoma. That's going to be a fun game. I think Texas has a chance to really assert itself as the clear-cut top team in the SEC, given what happened to Alabama and Tennessee last week and Missouri. Sorry, Zach. I think, Texas wins that game, then they're the clear number one. And it's also huge for Oklahoma as well. Oklahoma doesn't want to rack up a second loss. That game is now an SEC game. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Really, the only thing that's changing about that game is that it's an SEC game now. It's still got all the stakes. It's still at the neutral site. It's still going to be fun. It's still going to be a great atmosphere. It's still going to be packed. So that's going to be a super interesting one.
One of those traditional spots where upsets tend to happen.
Yes.
So Texas got to look out.
No, they do. It's if a team can do the Minnesota, Oklahoma, but. Texas is the favorite. And if you say, are they the best team in the country? Are they deserving number one? They certainly look like it. So at this point, them or Ohio State. I think Ohio State's. That game's at Oregon.
That game is at Oregon. Yeah.
I think they go in. I've not been impressed with Oregon. So far.
They've been. It feels like they're sleepwalking. So we'll see if they wake up.
It's not the sexiest game, certainly traditionally, but it is more interesting. I'm interested to see Vanderbilt's game at Kentucky.
Man, you stole mine. I thought for sure nobody would mention that. Yeah, go ahead.
Vanderbilt at Kentucky, can they handle success, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about with Ole Miss. Can they handle the success and the attention? People are saying, I heard someone say on the radio or on television, hey, they might win 8 games now. There's all of a sudden, obviously you beat the number one team in the country. Expectations are ratcheted up. But then you're going to Kentucky, a team that has to be a come down for Vandy, maybe kind of a traditional rival. But you're going there, and it's always a tough place to play. They're a physical team, and they beat up. They beat Ole Miss. I say beat them up, but beat them. So it's a very interesting game. And Zach, what the heck is Missouri doing going to play at UMass? What is that?
They had an old athletic director. I think it's been two ADs because these schedules
Did he
are all
lose a
made
bet?
like 10 years in advance. And he did the same thing. They were going to go to Memphis last year, and they actually bought out Memphis and played the game in St. Louis instead. They played a game in Wyoming like 8 years ago and lost. And you're like, yeah, you don't play these games on the road. Now, UMass is terrible. I don't think it'll just be a nice trip to Boston for fans. But
that's fine.
Yeah.
It is a nice part of the country to visit. But I mean, I think sometimes Missouri, forgets that they're in the SEC. SEC teams don't go play at a UMass.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I guess we'll see. But speaking of
Zach
Missouri,
went to Missouri, in case you're wondering why I'm giving him a hard time.
Speaking of Missouri, I think a common theme of this week, you mentioned how Vandy handles success. How does Alabama and Tennessee, Missouri, leave Missouri aside because it's UMass and we're not going to learn anything anyway, but how do Alabama and Tennessee kind of rebound from these shocking losses, right? And they both have games you think they should win, and before the season, you wouldn't have necessarily thought twice about it. Tennessee's at home against Florida, Alabama's at home against South Carolina. But after what happened last week, do we get that traditional rebound where now they kind of circle the wagons and show everybody what they're capable of? I particularly look at the game in Knoxville where Florida seems to have righted the ship a little bit. Mm-hmm. We'll see what they can do. And you also look back at some of their early losses to Miami and Texas A&M. Those teams look like they're top 10 teams now, so maybe those aren't as bad of losses. Could Florida give the Vols a game?
Yeah, I mean, the field for the SEC championship game, it feels much more even, and it feels that the race to that game feels a lot more open than it did 2 weeks ago. And LSU's schedule in particular got a little bit more difficult when you saw what Arkansas did to Tennessee and what you saw Texas A&M do to Missouri. I think the playing field is level, right? So we don't really know what to expect. Could Alabama just dominate South Carolina? Of course. Could Tennessee dominate Florida? Yeah, sure. But are we? How much do we really know? We don't really know a whole lot about these teams yet, and I think we're just going to find out more about these teams in the next 2 weeks. And we're going to find out which teams are really the bona fide playoff contenders that we thought they were, or that we didn't think they were.
I think in Alabama's case, what they've shown themselves so far to be is a team that can play really great and then can really just take their eye off the ball, or just kind of lose it. And they never led against Vandy. I mean, and they blew that big lead to Georgia. So
it feels like they'll be focused this week.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I'm thinking I think they're going to come back and be focused. Tennessee, like Ole Miss's offense, they haven't blown the doors off their last two SEC opponents. They went to Oklahoma, not an easy place to play, and they didn't go up and down the field. And obviously they lost last week in a low-scoring game at Arkansas. So I think the way Florida's playing, I think they're a little vulnerable. I don't think Alabama's really vulnerable to this in this game. They got other games they are, but Tennessee is on a little bit of a watch. The confidence is shaken for both teams. I think Bama rebounds against South Carolina team that doesn't really move. They can't really throw the ball.
Yeah.
And then, but Florida, that's a traditional rival. It's funny how that game has, in my mind, maybe not for someone like Reed.
It used to be the game in September in college football.
Used to be the game, and talk about setting a tone for the rest of the season, and it's now not kind of an afterthought, but it is taking a little more interest on this week after Tennessee's loss. Compared
to Ole Miss LSU, it's clearly not the game of the week in the SEC, and it's behind Texas Oklahoma too, in my opinion. So, Reed, to your point, we talked about a 9-3 team possibly getting into the playoff. I think it is more likely than not, maybe much more likely than not, that a 6-2 team in the SEC makes it to the SEC championship game. I'm not sure you're going to have two teams at 7-1 or better. The way this, everybody already has a loss except for Texas A&M, and LSU.
There's 9 one-loss teams.
Yeah, and so and that will. I'm talking about conference losses. Texas A&M, Texas, and LSU are the only unbeaten teams left. So that brings us to LSU Ole Miss. Want to let you know, first of all, today's episode of LSU Sports Insider was brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States. They have every construction need you could imagine. They've got it filled: industrial, commercial coatings, scaffolding erection, refractory services, general maintenance services, from large capital projects to commercial projects, or your small quick response needs. Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business, they're a proud community partner, supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. At Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Okay, prediction time. LSU hosting Ole Miss, 6:30 Saturday night. As I mentioned, the betting line, Ole Miss by 3.5. Over-under is 61.5. Last year, they, 104 they got to? I don't think we're going to see 104. But we might see 64. So let's see. Reed, what have you got prediction-wise, LSU, Ole Miss?
I said Ole Miss 34, LSU 30. So I think based on that, Ole Miss covers and the over hits. And I think that LSU has a real shot to win this game. So I'm picking Ole Miss, but I do think that LSU has a really good chance to pull off an upset. I think, the factors that we sort of can't measure, the home environment, the nighttime in Tiger Stadium, I think that helps LSU. But I do feel better about their chances than I did maybe 2 weeks ago before South Alabama. I think, it was important that we got to see that complete performance heading into the bye week before LSU takes on Ole Miss. But that being said, I think I still want to see more from the LSU defense before I pick it to win a game like this. Just because, they are better, but there are still some things they need to improve on, like their pass defense, their coverage, their man-to-man coverage. I still need to see a little bit more from their pass rush against a true SEC offensive line, and I need to see exactly how the linebackers fare without Harold Perkins and how LSU really adjusts its defense against a real quality opponent without the weapon that Harold Perkins is. So I'm not quite there with LSU. I think it's a competitive game. I think they absolutely have a good chance to win, but I'm not quite there. I'm confident enough to pick them to win this game.
All right, so Reed's got Ole Miss. Rat?
If you just look at it on paper, look at the numbers, you pick Ole Miss. I think there's a lot of intangibles that are in LSU's favor. First of all, it should be just a great crowd. I had someone call me for tickets, and they never call me for tickets. I was like, I don't know. Scott Woodward told us we were leaving the football building on Monday. People are calling for tickets. Said, you need to go to the secondary market, I'm afraid. So it should be a great crowd. It should be a great atmosphere. It's a night game at Tiger Stadium. It's everything you want for the 100th anniversary season of LSU football. And but on paper, Ole Miss looks like the better team. But there are intangibles in LSU's favor. A rabid home crowd. Ole Miss, there's a lot of pressure on Ole Miss to succeed. They've put all their eggs in the NIL transfer portal basket this year to try to make the college football playoff. And if they lose this one, they're really up against it because you still have Georgia and you still have some other tough games down the stretch. I think it's a classic. I think it goes back and forth. But I think maybe my thinking is colored by the fact that Ole Miss just doesn't ever quite seem to come through these games in Tiger Stadium. I pick LSU 27-24. Damian Ramos boots a game-winning field goal in the final seconds after a Nussmeier drive leads them down the field. So
I like
should
the
be a classic.
Specifics. I love the specifics. All right. I guess I'm the tiebreaker here, and I'm with Reed. I've got Ole Miss winning this game 30-27. I got LSU covering the spread, but I think it's a similar type game to you guys. I do think talking about the crowd is going to be important for LSU to keep that crowd in it the whole night. They can't fall behind 10-0, 17-7, that sort of thing, and kind of let the crowd interest wane a little bit, or else they're going to have to do something to get back in it. And to me, the deciding factor here is that as good as we know Ole Miss offense can be, I think that defense is for real, particularly the defensive line. And LSU's offensive line has not been quite as good as I thought it was going to be this year. They're going to have a big game. And I just lean slightly toward Ole Miss getting the big road victory. So we shall see. The good news for you is we're going to have a post-game show after the game Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, probably about 20 minutes after the game ends. I'll be on the air. I'll be joined by these guys, and Wilson Alexander will be there as well. Maybe Koki Riley. We'll figure out who can who can sneak off of their deadline writing to come join me, and we'll discuss it, and we'll show your comments and all of that good stuff too.
Hopefully the lights won't go out this time. Right?
Yeah, hopefully not. That was interesting. And then we'll be back on Monday with another podcast and start looking ahead to Arkansas. So for Reed Darcey and Scott Rabalais, and our producer today was Robert Young, I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll see you next time on the LSU Sports Insider.